Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ed Arnold, and I'm Vice President of Products here at LeveragePoint. I'd like to welcome all of you to another one of our monthly webinars of thought leadership in value-based strategy. Sponsored by LeveragePoint. LeveragePoint provides the only software solution for value-based pricing. We offer a SaaS-based collaboration platform that links all cross-functional team members involved in building and executing a value-based strategy that changes the way companies create, communicate, and capture value. You can find out more about us from our website, leveragepoint.com. Now, during the webinar, if you have any specific questions or comments, please feel free to enter them in the right-hand panel in the questions section. And then later, we'll respond to as many of them as we can. Also remember, complete our quick survey upon exiting today's webinar, because if you do, you'll be entered into our raffle to win a copy of the book, The ROI of Pricing, which, by the way, was edited by today's presenter. So let me introduce him to you right now. He is noted pricing expert and author, Dr. Stephan Liozu. Dr. Liozu currently runs his own consultancy practice called Value Interruption Advisors, and he offers an acclaimed certification program called CVM, that means Customer Value Modeler, for business professionals. In addition, he is an adjunct professor and visiting scholar at Case Western Reserve University. He also holds a seat on the advisory board of the Professional Pricing Society. And personally, I'll add that I think Dr. Liozu is one of the most dynamic and popular presenters, and we could tell that by the size of the audience on a Friday afternoon in the field of strategic pricing. So we're really looking forward to his talk today. And so with that, Stephan, glad to have you with us again.
All right, thank you very much. I hope I'm clearly speaking and everybody can hear me well. So I wanted to welcome everybody to this very interesting discussion about how one might consider what value-based pricing is. And you probably have seen many posts and discussions lately on LinkedIn or on Twitter, including a paper that was published by Pricing Society in their, I believe it was Pricing Advisors for September. But pretty much I'm making the strong case that to be successful in value-based pricing, you have to consider value-based pricing much more than a pricing strategy. And it is a strategy that really touches multiple functions in organizations. So in my experience as a thought leader, upcoming or emerging thought leader, I would say humbly, and my experience as a consultant and a trainer, I see many companies that are very, very interested in deploying value-based pricing, but they're facing roadblocks during the execution phases. So they actually do a great job at doing the EVE process, conducting the customer value analysis, and transferring that into value models into price setting. But unfortunately, then, what is done with the outcome of the value modeling is difficult. It often does not get used in marketing or in the selling process, which is a shame because the information is available. So that's what I said, that value-based pricing must be considered as a go-to market strategy. Because you look at the activities that you actually conduct when you do value-based pricing, and it's very profound for any firm, including segmentation. Segmentation is not a tactic. Segmentation is a profound way of looking at your customer segments, at grouping your segments based on whether you go demographic, firmographics, or user need segmentation, or purchasing behavior or patterns. When you explore differentiation value, what is true differentiation, and where does it reside? Where is it hidden? So it's not a pricing discussion. It's an existential business model and a strategy discussion. The activity of customer value modeling itself can be, you could model supply chain activities, you could model financial activities, how you manage cash and how you interact in the credit side with your customer. So I go on and on and on, and at the end of the day, yes, it is a pricing in the way that it allows you to do better pricing, but it also requires a strong level of alignment and collaboration with multiple functions in the firm. Now, obviously, I mentioned innovation, and I mentioned marketing, and I mentioned sales, which is more on the commercial front. But you could argue, and I will have a slide later, that any company, any department might be touched by value-based pricing activities if you do it to the fullest of its potential. So, I really look at value-based strategies then, and how is it, that it can build competitive advantage. And it's essentially because of the, I would say, the secret sauce in deploying and executing value-based pricing is not actually the running of the the conducting of the EVE process, which at times may be mechanical, may be mathematical, and pretty straightforward. But it is in the ability of a company to create competitive advantage using it by creating a collaboration spirit, interpretation systems that will allow to validate, triangulate value data, etc., etc. So I really look at value-based strategies as a way to create very strong competitive advantage. And at the end of the day, what you do is what is in front of you on the slide here, the VRIO. To be able to create a long-term competitive advantage with value-based pricing and strategies, you have to make sure this is valuable. Obviously, it's going to bring a lot of tremendous value internally and for the customer by extracting the value. It's rare because not every company does it. And as you know, only 20% to 25% of companies pretend to be doing value-based pricing. It's probably less if you look at both value-based pricing and value strategies. It's not easy to imitate. So, and that's really when you get into the secret sauce. You cannot imitate collaboration spirit, innovation spirit, ability to talk to customers, translating customer data. These are not imitable. And at the end, it is the ability to execute. If you do a great job at collecting the data and measuring it, what do you do with it? Do you then include it in your website, on your marketing brochures, on your selling sheets, on your product advantage portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not only on the design side when team conduct the value-based pricing activities, but also on the execution side, which is equally important. And that's where usually I see a lot of companies struggling. How do you execute, how do you deploy the outcome in the organization? So generally, companies that do it very well, the best in class at value-based pricing and EVE, do all these activities right here. And those are more on the technical side. Usually they have application engineers to be able to conduct the value in use analysis, conduct techno-marketing activities, and what's called total cost of ownership. They usually do a strong user need segmentation process because step number 2 of value-based pricing is segment the market. So you combine qualitative inquiries, you combine quantitative analysis, and then you look at your transactional data to be able to look at data-driven analytics that will put customers in segments more on usage and patterns. And then you triangulate all these 3 methodologies into a segmentation process, which is fairly advanced. And yet, I believe in my experience, I haven't seen one company that does segmentation to the fullest of its potential. These companies also have a very strong value discovery process, and they take it very seriously. And that discovery process goes in the upfront, I would say, portion of the front end of innovation, what's called. So there's a lot of value discussion in the innovation process upfront, as well as the voice of customers that they conduct, linked to value in use, linked to the discovery of unmet needs, hidden needs, and the pains of the customers in the field or in their plant, et cetera, et cetera. So the VOC and market knowledge is systematic, consistent, and rich. Most companies develop their own tools. They have their own ROI calculators, total cost of ownership, and value databases. And you see this is not a pricing activity. This is actually developed by a combination of marketing and finance working together to develop tools that can be used systematically by the application engineers and the business development folks and usually these people bring back the data into these tools, and that crunches the data into the EVE model. Also, some of these companies have separated relational and transactional selling. So they have maybe a strategic account management force, a SAM force, or a business development force that will do most of the value in use, most of the strategic value discovery, where the transactional activities will be left with the sales force. So you do have a duality here that can be at times expensive, but it is required because you don't have the same conversation. You don't specifically speak with the same people when you do value in use. Obviously, you want to stay away from the purchasing people, because purchasing people will not share with you value data on the customer side. So advanced training program, it goes without saying. Knowledge competitors, this is another area where I found a lot of breakdowns, because to do a strong EVE process and to be able to build, you have to know your competitors inside and out, and you have to spend quite a bit of resources at finding competitive data, finding competitive pricing information. And last but not least, we have what I call engineering centers that can duplicate the customer process, whether it's a one-way mirror, into a kitchen, looking at how people use pots and pans, or we have a labs that includes customer process equipment, so that they can duplicate their products in the customer process. So these are some of the capabilities I see across all the best in class. But the number one thing and step number one of value-based pricing is about getting pricing data on your competitors. And this comic is is satirical, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of improvisation and a lot of approximation when it gets to how much, especially in the B2B world, what is the price level of our competitors. Now, in the B2C world, in retail, you could use price intelligence software that would click, on real time, give you the price level that are found on the web sphere, the internet sphere. But in B2B, it's fairly complicated to get to the net price that competitors are using with your customers or your prospects. So you do have to develop capabilities on finding the data, triangulating that competitive data, maybe developing some ranges, and then hosting all this data into a centralized database of competitive information. And obviously, it is not going to be a bingo tool. So another capability is extracting differentiation. Lots of misconception of what are nice to have to stay in business, what are must-haves to stay in business, and what are true differentiators. And Leverage Point and I conducted a survey at the end of 2012, asking respondents what are the difficulties in conducting value-based pricing, and one of them was extracting differentiation and selecting the right value drivers. All right, the true differentiators have to be value drivers. These are the one that really make you win the business, and they have to be measurable, obviously, quantifiable. When you hear a salesperson telling you, we've been in business 120 years, well, that could be a nice to have. Do you have to quantify a nice to have? In some cases you do, but most of the time it is better in the value model to keep it to 3 to 5 components, which are true differentiators. So selecting the right one is critical. So gathering, interpreting, and using value data obviously is another skills, as I mentioned before. Value in use analysis, value in use assessment is one of the most common and complex technique to use to extract, collect, and assess the economic value, as you see in line number 2. It is complex, it is very reliable when you have a team of application engineers, but it requires a lot of skills. And the same with the internal engineering assessment. Conjoint analysis can be used. It's also very complex. The reliability depends on how much qualitative data you've collected before, so that you have a good concept to test. But is recommended when you do new to the world, maybe more new to the world innovations, for example. Some of the techniques are very simple: focus group, value assessment, direct questioning, indirect questioning, and obviously, the more you ask people, so how much is it worth, the less the quality of the data. So And the same with importance rating. So you want to, at the end of the day, it's not you're going to pick one and not do anything else. Most companies that I see do value and use analysis, but they also do focus groups to validate some of the findings. They'll talk to a bunch of customers to ask them indirectly what the worth of some portion of the offering might be. And at the end, it requires a lot of interpretation skills. It's about a sales manager with a finance manager, with a marketing guy, and the pricing person sitting down and say, okay, we found that with that technique, we found that with that technique, and we found out with that technique. How do we make sense in all of this? How do we, triangulate all of this to make sure that the value we're measuring is actually credible, believable, and it actually reflects what the customer is doing? So there is a lot of iteration, a lot of dynamic assessment where sometimes you will have to go back to the field and revalidate what you heard. So not to be taken lightly, I would say, in the list of skills. And obviously, dynamic value modeling is key because the value perceptions change. The value models can be very obsolete, and that's why I highly recommend the Leverage Point platform, because it allows you to dynamically manage your value models. And at the end of the day, who's got the last version? When you work in a collaborative platform, it's difficult to know who has the last version. So then you want to make sure you update the last version, or you do the save as of a value model for a specific account, a specific application, or a specific product. So value models are sometimes incomplete, and they need to be tweaked as you meet new customers or you change your assumptions. And it's difficult to do if you manage that in Excel or on paper. And I've seen it done, and it can be quite confusing and disruptive, especially when once you're done value modeling your innovation, you move into your core business and you have maybe 100 and 200 SKUs to value model for. So it's better to build a platform and then have an infrastructure that allows you to do fast with the owner of the process. So unique capabilities across the board. And the capabilities cannot be only in pricing, as you can see in this slide. It has to be in innovation. It has to be in marketing. It has to be in negotiation and value selling. And pretty much you have to overlap the 4 buckets that you have here under or over the 3 steps of value management: creation, quantification, and capture. So you can look at this as a very complex system where you would have activities in creation for innovation, but also activities in quantification for innovation, and the same for marketing. And it needs to be complete, because creation, quantification, and capture are very critical. And in value strategy deployment, you need to pay attention to your innovation all the way down to the value selling. You cannot do value-based pricing and not look at your innovation and what value they bring to the table from the very beginning, from the front end of innovation. And to be able to look at this as a system, as a very complex matrix, you have to look at customized training program across the board, developing proprietary tools that you can use in the innovation process as well as in the strategic account management process, for example, scorecards, value reporting processes. And you need to have, for example, an innovation council that connects with the pricing council and vice versa. So the information is through the tool and through the value modeling process is communicated upstream through marketing, through pricing, through sales. So you need unique collaboration between teams, no doubt. And a sense of confidence. Everybody needs to have the same confidence in the level of differentiation we create, and it starts in innovation. When a new idea, a new service, a new concept is developed, what is the true differentiation that we're developing? What is the needs that we're solving, or the pain that we are remediating in the customer mind? So a strong sense of confidence, so that at the end of the process, when we do value selling and negotiation for value, this is already populated in all the documents, in all the marketing documents, in all the stage gate documents. So the experience of the sales force launching or maintaining existing products is better. They have the right tools, they have the right techniques, they have the right value messages going out to market. So if I look at innovation then, and I'm going to go through the 4 boxes very quickly. Innovation is supposed to lead to more differentiation. Now, obviously, some innovation will be less innovative, I would say, so more Me Too products or more let's match what competition is doing. But at the end of the day, the essence of innovation is to create uniqueness, to create something different, to develop unique value propositions, unique selling propositions in the portfolio. And usually there is a strong relationship between that because you're solving customer problems or you're creating emotional connections or you're creating gains with them. And they should be able to pay for it. They should have a higher customer willingness to pay, which then, through the value capture process, then leads to pricing power. So I do believe there is a strong link between innovation, differentiation, and pricing power. And most of the time, when I do training or workshop or seminars in companies, I ask them to invite the innovators to the table. And I actually wrote a paper on how to infiltrate value-based pricing in a very maybe static or protective core business. And one of the ways to do it is through innovation, starting embedding this in the stage gate process, the value modeling process, the EVE, and having great discussion on value proposition, value models, and value levels, etc. So then during the marketing process, you develop a series of tools that can be used to collect, list, and project the economic value that you measure. So starting with customer success stories, showing the savings, showing maybe through ROI demonstration or ROI stories, if they allow you to do this, like SKF is doing. I don't know if you know, but SKF has a proprietary database of over 41,000 customer value stories, where the actual customers gave them how much money SKF saved them. So this is a type of success stories you want to be able to have in your marketing portfolio. Application data sheets, again with ROI calculation, early specification with opinion leaders, where you will go in and talk to the pioneers and the leaders of an industry, showing them the value proposition, showing them how much potential savings or gains you can create for the industry, and getting them on board early. Then you do a different type of data sheets and marketing bulletin, where you actually would list some of these key benefits, moving away from product attributes and focusing on customer benefits, again with examples. If you have 3 or 4 benefits in there in the data sheet, then you would say, maybe with this specific benefit, you have the opportunity to save up to 10 to 15% transportation cost, or 5% increase in productivity, which leads on average to an increase of, reduction of $200,000 of cost. But the challenge here that I see in most companies is that they are not confident enough to take the outcome of the EVE process and to actually populate the specific question, populate the specific documents with value data. Now, sometimes there is a lack of confidence that the marketers, either they were not in the value modeling process as a function, or they receive the EVE outcome separately and they don't believe in it, they don't think it's credible, therefore it doesn't go in the marketing documents. Other times, lawyers, legal departments will not allow you to put claims and value savings into any marketing documents. So in that case, you probably have to beef up your disclaimers or give a lot of averages or stick with the some percentage number. But at least, if you are going to put benefits at a couple percentage level, and if they allow you to do so, average savings or average gain data based on a population of 10, 20, 50, 100 customers with big disclaimers. So the disclaimers are important because there is no guarantee that every customer will have the same type of savings or gains. Tools are testimonials, videos, YouTube stories, you name it, value stories that you can populate on your website, you can put on YouTube, link to an app, etc. And then obviously all of this goes into the value selling materials. Throughout these documents, you need to use the outcome of EVE for specific products or product family or services. And that's why you do EVE. And that's where I see many companies not putting a lot in their marketing materials or the suite of tools that they have, for some reason, although they might be involved in the EVE process, they don't feel that they should use them as much. So there is a disconnect there. And obviously the last step is value selling. Then, the toolbox is complete. And because marketing is the R&D of sales, by giving sales the right value-based tools, then you can use the marketing bulletin, the value selling sheets, value response to pricing objection, training on true differentiation, customer success stories, and maybe do some incentive based on value to go out and sell for value. And many companies that I see do not have these tools available to enable and empower the sales force to be value merchants, value sellers. So it's fairly complicated, and obviously there's a lot of frustration from the side of the sales force because they don't have the tools. From the side of pricing, where they know the value that's being created, that they cannot communicate it to the sellers. So it does require, early on in the value modeling process, multifunctional engagement. And to be even more extreme, I have done value modeling exercises with HR people, marketing communication people, finance people, IT people. The more diverse the group of people you have interact by doing value models, the easier it is then to do value-based strategies, because everybody understands the concept of true differentiation. They realize how much value is in the product, and they have that sense of connection to that differentiation. They now have a rationality about, yes, our product is different, and it's $1 million of value. So it creates miracles when I put multifunctional team in a room, working groups of 4 or 5, and you let them do value modeling in their own product. So at the end of the day, by doing this and by making sure you do value-based strategies across the board, your cultural value is moving. And you link value-based strategies to a lot of these organizational elements on the right side, from how do you design the collaboration of teams. Do you give them councils? Do you give them forums to interact? Do you have webinars? How do you let them interact? How do you align the goals and incentives of the organization? Are you sure you want to have the sales force still incentivized on volume when the rest, maybe innovation is incentivized on innovation rate and marketing is incentivized on margin? So alignment and collaboration are critical. Having obviously a customer orientation helps. It's not needed, but it helps to be bringing the outside in and the voice of the customer. You do need to have long-term orientation and resilience, because it is difficult to get the data. It is difficult to change the customer behaviors and the sales force behavior when they're facing them. So it's not a question of doing it for 3 months and giving up, especially if you're on the stock market and at the end of the quarter you tend to make the numbers by giving discounts. I think that definitely destroys the goodwill of the value culture that you have created. So long-term orientation is important around value and building capabilities for the long term, not only technical capabilities on how to do EVE and value strategies, but also the softer aspects we mentioned earlier. So it's all about changing mindset, changing behavior, it's change management and learning, and that's why most scholars, including in my work that I conducted in my PhD, recommend that it's a 3 to 5 year process. It's not overnight that you're going to create a cultural value and you're going to fully align innovation, marketing, pricing, and sales to be value-based. So, I mentioned earlier in the process that it's all about building competitive advantage. And when you do value strategies, you have to pay attention to the learning process. How do people learn together? How do you make sure as a leader or as an organization that the knowledge that you're creating is sticking in teams, sticking in the minds of your users, sticking in the mind of your collaborators, so that you're building month after month, you're building additional capabilities in them. So you may start with doing EVE training, then you may continue by doing true differentiation training, then you continue by doing segmentation training, because value-based pricing is a 6-step process that has a lot of science behind it, yet there is a lot of art. So you need to combine the science training with a lot of the art training, which is around interpretation, around asking question, iteration, experimentation, and that's how you create strong competitive advantage. Otherwise, everybody would do it. Now there is a reason why only 20% of companies claim that they do value-based pricing and value strategies, because it cannot be easily copied. Otherwise, everybody would do it. So I always recommend to my prospects and my clients and my friends in the organization is, if you're going to do it fully, do it well, and learn everything there is to learn to it. And include everybody along the way on the journey. So I mentioned innovation, I mentioned marketing, I mentioned pricing and selling. But I found that sometimes it is also necessary to bring on board customer service and have them learn about the science of value messaging, value communication, explain to them the differentiation, explain to them the concept of value sharing and value communication, and bring them on board the journey by non-stop communicating key value messages to the customer base. The customer service teams are in the front line talking to hundreds and hundreds of customers every day. Why not value message? The same with the communications team. They craft speeches and documents and annual reports. Why not bring them on board and ask them, train them about customer value, train them about value-based strategies, and include them in the training so that they understand the differentiation and what it is important to value message. So internal communications, marketing communications, human resources have a key role to play in value-based strategies, because value-based strategy requires a lot of skills, as I mentioned before. So you really need to develop customized training programs, coaching programs, especially around value selling, mentoring programs, peer coaching, you name it. And you need to create an alignment in incentives and goals. And there's no other, there is no other option than to inform at least human resources on what is being done around value-based strategies, so that they understand that the competencies that are required and the training program that are required needs to be different. Everything is going to have to be value-based. So I could add in there more functions. I could add, for example, technical training, any functions that are touch point with the customer, technical support, demonstration, showrooms, you name it, retail outlets, and on and on and on. So at the end, it's about changing the organizational mindset by developing value-based programs across the board. And too many times I go in organization and they only focus on pricing and the sales force. And I tell them, this is only a fraction of who you need to touch. You need to touch much more and train much more than these two functions. And now you understand why.
Okay, well, excellent job as always. Thank you, Stephan, for that presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you want the audience wants more information on this topic, then we would strongly recommend that you attend the Professional Pricing Society conference that's coming up in Las Vegas on October 21st. And Stephan's doing a one-day EVE workshop that gets into the mechanics and the details and a lot of other topics related to value modeling. So there's the details there, and there's a link to the website as well. All right, so we already have a few questions that came in during the webinar. And by the way, for folks who are listening, there's still time to get your questions on the list if you want to. Again, go to the questions panel. But first, I wanted to take a moment to illustrate how companies use the Leverage Point platform to, in a word, leverage the important strategic capabilities that Stephan just talked about. So usually our customers first apply our value-based platform on the innovation side, as you see here. And even starting at the ideation stage and moving through the different stages of the stage gate process up through the product launch. And then after the product launch, they use our platform to develop customized marketing and sales content that enables salespeople to effectively communicate those value messages, throughout multiple phases of the value selling process. So this platform, as you can see below, breaks down a number of the functional silos that often derail an effective execution. And I think that was one of the strongest parts of the presentation on Stephan, when you're talking about having a broader approach to value or a mindset. And then further, using this technology enables companies to embed best practices that lead to better decisions, everything from product decisions to better sales performance. All of this leads to the whole point of the value-based strategy, which is higher margins for your business. Okay, so thanks for listening to that. And we're going to address the questions now. And one question I always like to answer up front is, yes, everyone will get a copy of this presentation as well as a link to the recording. And again, just a reminder to make sure that you fill out the survey. We have our contact information for Stephan on the screen, as well as Leverage Point if you want to send us any comments. And okay, so Stephan, are you ready for some questions?
Yes, I am. Okay.
So let's take this first one here, and this is getting to the conjoint analysis. And the question is, has there ever been a comparison between conjoint price findings for a new product and subsequent value model for the same new product? I guess comparing before and after conjoint studies.
Well, I will tell, and I don't have an experience in actually doing that experiment, as is mentioned. I've seen a lot of bad conjoint projects not getting too much interesting output, and I always recommend a very different approach to conjoint by starting very strongly with concept testing and a lot of maybe more canoe work before going into conjoint. But I recommend conjoint usually when there is a difficulty in finding reference values or competitive offering, which then can fit into the value model. But I think I don't have a specific experience comparing both.
Yes. Okay. That's fine. So moving on. So the question is, when you speak about value-based innovation, we could put customer insights and ethnography inside this topic, for example, and historic or a history about customer experience. I'm not exactly sure what that question's about. Stephan, any thoughts?
So yeah, as I mentioned before, the more you ask the customer, the less the quality of the information. So market research and voice of customer research is moving more into observation than actual doing surveys and doing regular maybe focus groups. So ethnographic research is very popular these days, and it's also one of the skills that is required for value in use analysis, and that includes process mapping, work analysis, time flow analysis, where you would go in and observe and count, do your own counting without asking the customer. Now, obviously, then you want to break it down maybe into subset and ask smaller question to break down so that you don't overwhelm customers with, oh, hey, tell me how much this is worth, the whole process. But, customer observation is used in many it's actually mentioned in many upfront of innovation books, the front end of innovation by Goffin and others, and it's kind of a very powerful tool for not only innovation but extracting opportunities with greater willingness to pay, because you're really looking at pains and gains.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think observation very, very, very powerful, and it's interesting, at least in our own experiences in working with customers in value modeling, sometimes a big barrier is real lack of first-hand experience in seeing customers use the product. And yeah, you don't get that experience from a survey. I think, being on site with a customer is probably the best way. So I totally agree with that. All right, another question that came up is, how do you measure success of a value-based strategy?
Well, I would say you have a outcome KPIs, profit, gross margin, price realization, and profit margin. Definitely that the numbers don't lie. And then on the cultural side, on the value side, and I think you would have to look at the number of products that are going through the value modeling. So you would do more of a value type of dashboard with making sure that every product goes through the EVE process, making sure that every product has a marketing bulletin, every product has a value selling sheet, et cetera, so that means the opportunity to use these tools across the board. So it's a question of adoption of all these techniques, right? It's a question of also measuring your value culture from the very beginning, so you have a benchmark, and tracking it over time, how is that evolving? And that's something that I started doing more and more, value culture assessment. And then at the end, you have your financial outcome, which is really what top executives care about. They don't, obviously they're going to make sure that it's adopted and people are good at it, but at the end of the day, you invest money in value-based strategies, you want to see payback. So I would always recommend to customers to develop a dashboard which include all these dimensions. Some are more qualitative, some are more change management oriented for the value culture, and others are pure financial matrix.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and a related question is, can you identify companies that have achieved success with a value-based strategy? So what are some of the companies that are role models in terms of success?
Yeah, so I would say, you have the usual suspect. I can give you the names of Apple. Obviously, everybody knows Apple is very good at pricing and very good at creating very strong innovation that people line up at 4 a.m. to go buy very expensive tools, right? Very expensive hardware and software, and so in the B2C world, definitely there is a lot of very visible companies like the Procter & Gamble's, and all you have to do is look at their profit margin, Johnson & Johnson, and those are just companies that are religiously doing value-based innovation, value-based pricing, value-based marketing. 3M is another example, 22% EBIT, on dozens and dozens of billions of dollars of sales, high innovation rate, very strong capabilities in pricing, and continuously help, improving and asking themselves the right questions. In the B2B, more B2B industrial world, you have the Parker Hannifin, the Eastman Chemicals, the companies that the Graingers that are traditionally very good at doing value-based strategies. And again, because most of the time they present at PPS, so you see them, but also you look at their profit margins, and you usually see a 15 to 25% EBIT percentage, which is pretty high for industrial companies. So that's the type of company that I recommend you pay attention to, like an SKF also. SKF was recently presented in Europe in a conference and showed a 5-point increase in EBIT by doing more systematic total cost of ownership and value communication, value management. So there are multiple data points out there, including a lot more research done in the ROI or pricing book that show the return. And there's a famous survey that was done by Monitor at the time, you remember, Ed, that shows companies that do value-based strategies earn 8% more gross margin points than companies who don't. So all these nuggets you can use to justify your value-based investments.
Yes, right, absolutely. So what about companies then who are not, leaders in value and they're trying to catch up? How do you get started?
Well, I will say it's a commitment from the top. It's a strategic positioning, and it's a business model decision. Now, I could take Samsung, for example, and Samsung has a lot of market share, but they recently announced a 60% reduction in their EBIT. I don't know exactly why, but I can imagine that the pricing strategy of Samsung may not reflect a value-based approach. I'm not sure. And usually a lot of market followers or a non-pricing leader, as innovative companies, have a difficult time adopting a value-based approach. Now, again, I don't have data that support my impressions, but it would be an interesting research project to conduct in the future. I think it starts with innovation. You have to have an innovation spirit, and for the simple reason that value-based pricing is an innovation. It's an innovation in itself. So if you want to do value-based pricing, it requires, as a culture, that you're ready to change and try new things. If you do cost plus and you're a market follower, it'll be difficult to go to value-based pricing because your culture is used to follow and not to reinvent yourself, come up with disruptive processes and disruptive methodologies to make yourself better. That's what I said in the presentation. It's all about learning, and it starts, in the strategy, in the innovation. It's learning across the board.
Okay, and finally, I was wondering if you could make some comments about the various technology solutions that are available in the pricing space. I know you had talked a little bit about some tools, internal tools, but just some more depth on that.
So yes, there's a variety of tools, and now let me be straight. And the only value-based pricing software is the leverage point software. Okay, all the rest is in Excel or proprietary tools or solutions. Now, in the actual collection of value data, which is fed then in the leverage point platform or some other platform, then usually most of the tools are access-based or internally, a program using maybe as a website, and it's about quick access from the sales force or from the business development people or from the application engineers. They have their own platform, web-based or app-based, that they actually go in and feed the value calculations, which then goes somewhere in the central database and then is used for the value modeling. So, and it's what SKF did. They have their own database, value database, with these 41,000 value stories that they cannot cut and slice and dice and actually do benchmark by industry, by customer size, etc. So I would say there's one solution to do EVE and value-based strategies, all the way to communications, but as far as getting the data, there is only proprietary tools, and that I know of. I mean, I usually pay attention, and maybe something else came out, but that's what I've seen in the market.
All right, thank you. So I think that wraps up the questions for today. I just want to make a quick announcement about our upcoming webinars. So we have two really good ones coming up in the next few weeks. Actually, next week, we're going to have Laurent Cambier of Schneider Electric share his experiences and successes by having some really good success in implementing a value-based strategy in their IT business. So if folks are interested in hearing a first-hand account from someone who's actually doing this as we speak, you definitely want to check out that webinar next week. And then in November, we'll have another thought leader, George Cressman. He's a noted expert in the B2B world, especially a lot of background in the chemicals industry. And he's going to provide a fascinating talk, I think, on how you transform commodity products into value offerings. And why I say so is that we often get the question, what about commodities? And in George's world, there is no such thing as a commodity. So if you're interested in learning about that, that's another great webinar that you may want to attend. So look for an email about both of those soon. And so I'd like to thank everyone for their time today on this Friday. Again, don't forget to complete the short survey as you exit. And I'll thank you, Stephan, one last time for a great presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you, and until next time.